All right, so yesterday we had some issues with our iLock, so we moved things to the cloud and we made some retweaks here. So a couple things stand out as I'm listening to this again overnight. So for some variety here for these synths, as we can hear here, I may not want it to slush right away, so I might actually do this. So just hear me out here. So if I go back to position 1. Or I could have it go fade in and then let it pop up. So if we go back here to position 1, so to me, just listening to this in other formats outside of here, this little studio I'm in, and outside of headphones, it sounds a little too mid-rangey. Nothing wrong with that. I feel like the low end needs a little bit more oomph, but I'm looking at it here, and there is a little bit of oomph on the low end, right? We've got a bump, a 10K bump at 100. So I could probably roll off the high pass, which isn't even turned on actually. So what more can I do? Bump, lower it down to 50? I don't know. Let's find out. So we're going to write this in here, right? So this here, we are going to actually write this in from the beginning, and let's just experiment with it. We could always put it back to whatever it was before, right? So before that, I need to take care of one quick thing. All right, so we had to re-import something here. So I had to pause that for a moment. Okay, so this was re-imported. A slight change to the order, but it's pretty much very similar to the original order. Just a slight variation was put in here in the middle in this particular spot for these instruments. Okay, so let's go back here. So we're going to write in this effect here on this particular track for the 808 synth. I'm sorry, for the blanket synth. So this blanket synth here, I'm just going to write in this effect. All right, so we're going to go to trim, and then just want to go, we're going to start, actually we're just going to go not in trim mode. We're going to start at the bottom. That's all we did. So we had it at a lower volume, and then we let it rise right up. We couldn't completely mute it, because as you heard, when we muted it and then let it go right back to its original gain setting, it just sounded like disjointed, right? It just sounded too sudden. It's like, what's this, right? So allowing a little bit of it to be in the background and then letting it really rise up in volume, it's not too much of a surprise. It doesn't seem kind of like a non sequitur. Well, this wasn't that much of a non sequitur, but so if we go back and just rewind this here and just play it again in context, we'll hear it. Just giving it some support. to, we can even move this. So we see here it comes in right at this part right here. If we really want to, we can actually push this back. Not by sample, but by bars. That's kind of odd that it does that, but anyhow. We could technically move this back if we wanted to, so. Too much reverb on here, so let me see what's going on with this. I might need to put a little bit of an EQ after this, so let me just clean this up here. As we can see, we don't need black hole here, we don't need Abbey Road chambers, we don't need Abbey Road plates, we don't need studio reverb, we don't need spring either, right? We don't need to have anything, I think, any more fancy than this EQ73 band. Could be the decay. We could always also lower the decay. Another part I wanted to fix here is the bass. The bass is interesting. So we have a predicament with the bass, right? The bass in this particular track, without it having a little bit of reverb directly on the track, it just sounds too forward in the mix compared to everything else. It doesn't kind of hang out with the rest of the band. It's just kind of like right in your face, and that's not the role we want for the bass in this particular track, right? So if I get rid of this, so I found myself in an interesting predicament because during the breakdown, I feel like I want to accent some delays on here, and we can't really add delay. We could actually technically automate a delay with this on this particular piece. So that's another option that we have here. I do want to see something here on my view meter, my waves. roughly at around the same volume. I could probably just turn it down a little bit more, like half a dB, but we're roughly at around the same volume. So you're probably asking, why does the bass now just have more charisma, right? Well, we're modeling analog gear in this instance, and at least the plugins are modeling analog gear. So the harder the input, right? It's modeled, or these plugins are designed in such a way that when you hit it harder, it's going to react the same way that the analog hardware itself is going to react, right? That's typically something that they try to put in the code, right? So now we have the bass has a little bit more charisma in it than it did before. So we're going to keep it this way, right? Usually I don't like a ton of charisma with the bass. It's too distracting, but I think in this case it works. It just kind of adds a little bit more grab to it, as we can hear here. So that's something I didn't really do with this track. I did look at other ways to sort of gain stage it, but, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but without a meter bridge, I've just kind of used the clip gain function here in Waves, in Pro Tools, which is this thing here, this audio suite, right? So I've been doing this and saying, well, let me just measure it to peak. And let me see what it says. Negative 3.8, peak RMS negative 30, right? So go figure. And what I used to do was, back in the old days, was with a meter bridge in front of me on a console, I would actually try to look at where the VU was. But I don't have a console, an analog console. Haven't mixed it on an analog console in I don't know how long now. So we're doing this as an experiment, right? So I'm saying, why don't I just use the Waves VU meter plugin, or you could use any VU meter plugin. Let's see if there's anything else we want to change on here. So we're not going to use any of these plugins. We're not going to use the SSL. The SSL would work for this mix. I just think the API console EQ and everything else, the API Vision channel strip, it has a much better sound for this particular track. So now we're kind of gain staging later than we should, but that's because I was gain staging it differently. Let's see what's going on here. I have more plugins than I would like on this particular Plex synth, but that's the way it's shaping up. So now let's see what happens when we boost this and lower the volume. So we're going to get rid of these groups here. right, so what I'm going to do here, we're at the 15-minute mark. I'm going to make a new video.